A very long time ago, so long ago that there weren't any cars yet, so long ago that the telephone hadn't been invented, there was once a farmer and his wife. One good day, the farmer and his wife became the proud parents of their firstborn son, Simon. Simon was 2 years old when he got his brother Hans. The birth of her second child cost her quite some effort. Hans was a lot bigger than his older brother Simon had been. Hans weighed almost 9 pounds. So you can imagine that mother was very proud of her second son, and proud of herself that she had brought such a sturdy boy into the world. Simon, the eldest, developed a love for devices and mechanisms. He always went to the workshop to see how his father maintained the tools. The sharpening of the plough and the scythe, repairs to the thresher, lubrication of the pump. Simon watched closely how it all worked. A farm is a fantastic place for a child. There were cows and pigs and chickens. Hans, the youngest, preferred to be near the animals. Hans threw his little arms up and hugged the cows. He lifted the chickens and put his nose between their warm feathers. He held the pigs by their ears and gave them kisses on their noses. The animals let it all happen. They weren't afraid of little Hans. They loved him as much as Hans loved them. When he came into the barn, the animals raised their heads and made little sounds of joy, as if they welcomed Hans into the barn and wanted to express how much they had missed him. The workshop was next to the barn. Above the workshop was the farm living room with the kitchen. The bedroom was next to the living area and above the stables. That was nice and warm in winter. The warmth of the animals went up, and so it was never really cold in the bedroom. The farmer and his wife made sure that both sons learned everything needed to be able to manage a farm themselves later, to become a farmer. That not only means the maintenance of the equipment, but also the care of the livestock. The cows have to be milked, the stables cleaned, and the eggs collected. Milk is made into butter and cheese at the farm. That the boys didn't learn. That would be the responsibility of the women they would marry. But a farmer's son should learn to record how many cows there are, how much milk they give, how many pigs are born, and things like that. Above all, they must learn to sell milk, cheese, butter, eggs, and also the cattle. When needed, the farmer took a big calf or cow to the market and showed the animal to people. If someone showed interest, the farmer and the buyer started negotiations. When it looked as if they may reach an agreement on the price, they began their final bargaining. One would hold his hand slightly forward, and the other slapped it with the flat of his own hand, and then vice versa, just as long until they agreed on a price. The elder son Simon always beamed at the sight of this scene, because it meant money, and money meant cookies with their tea, syrup for their pancakes. Hans, on the contrary, was quiet on the way back home. He knew he was going to miss the calf. Ideally, he would like to keep all the animals, but he knew that wasn't possible. And so both Simon and Hans became good boys. Simon was smart and also a hard worker. He maintained all the farm equipment from the age of 14. A few years later, his father's eyes deteriorated. Then Simon took it upon himself to also do all the administration. You will understand that his parents were extremely proud of him. Hans was born big and remained tall, large, and strong. Although he was 2 years younger than his brother, he was a head taller and much stronger. One winter's day, when a calf was sick and had to go to the vet, they couldn't call the vet. You will remember that there were no phones yet. So Hans took the calf, it weighed 20 stone, on his shoulders and plodded miles through snow to the vet and back. Hans's parents and brother were very impressed by this feat and let Hans eat lots of potatoes with fat that evening. Hans was very strong and had coal shovel hands, but he also had a heart of gold and was very gentle with the animals. Hans loved the animals. He loved the smell of fresh milk, looking at the piglets suckling in a row, and smiled at the chickens, which at any time of the day were busy determining their pecking order. You should know, chickens have their own organization. The cockerel is the most important, and then there is an order for the hens. The more important a chicken is, the higher that chicken is in the pecking order. The more they get to eat, and a better place to wash or sleep. Anyway, that aside. On the other hand, the strong and tender Hans was incredibly clumsy with the devices and things. He tried to repair machines, but never quite got the parts back together. Hans was able to write a little, but his notes always had to be corrected by his father or his older brother. Simon, on the other hand, came into the stables as little as possible. Cleaning stables? He gladly left this for his younger brother Hans to do. Simon didn't like the smell of cattle. The smell of manure he found quite unbearable. He always had an excuse not to milk the cows or clean the stables. There was always something to be repaired. There was always something that needed to be recorded in the books. Or he simply said that Brother Hans could do these things much faster and better because Hans was so very strong. And so there was balance on the farm. Hans took care of the cattle. Simon took care of the things. The farmer and his wife worried about this. Because how were the brothers to keep their own farms when they grow up? To be a farmer, you have to be able to do it all. You need to be good with animals, and you need to know how to repair tools. One should be able to do the administration, and one should be able to sell. Simon could do the latter things very well, but he couldn't deal with the cattle. Hans was super with the animals, but he couldn't fix, sell, or do administration. Normally, a farm is inherited by the eldest son. It has always been this way. Younger brothers must marry the daughter of a farmer without a son and take over that farm. Or they can go to town and find work there. To go to town and work there, neither Simon nor Hans wanted to. They were accustomed to the open air, the view of the land, the wind in their hair, and the space and freedom. The farmer and his wife decided to leave the farm to Simon, their eldest, when they themselves would no longer be able to work. Simon was the eldest. He had first right. Simon was good with many things. He would just have to learn to work with animals. They decided to tell their sons immediately. Simon was pleased to hear that his parents had confidence in him, but worried about taking care of the animals. His parents made it all sound so easy. Then you just have to learn to work with the cattle, his father said. Hans, 2 years younger, respected the choice of his parents, but he also worried. There was only one girl he loved. That was Annette. Annette had an older brother who would take over his girlfriend's parents' farm. So what would be left for them? Hans was concerned about his own future. His mother had an idea. Mina, the daughter of Farmer Turp, was an only child, and she was still free. You could just marry Mina. But Hans didn't love Mina. He wanted to marry Annette. And so, both boys left the table with an uncomfortable feeling in their stomachs. Hans went to the stables. He wanted to be with the animals. Simon went to the workshop to work on a new table. Their parents went to sleep. In the workshop, Simon used a plane to work on a new wooden table. He was absent-minded, though. The sun had set, and Simon worked by the light of an oil lamp. After all, there was no electric lighting. To see if the table was right, he put the oil lamp on some upturned buckets next to the table, so that the light shone right over the surface. He walked around the table to see the result, but he stumbled. Simon fell against the table. The table moved and hit the oil lamp. The lamp fell to the floor and broke. Oil spread on the workshop floor, and a moment later it burst into flames. The oil and wood shavings on the floor were alight. Simon tried to extinguish the fire by beating it with a blanket. But that only made the burning shavings fly into all corners of the workshop. In just a moment, the entire workshop was ablaze. "Help!" shouted Simon. His mother and father didn't hear him. They were both sleeping on the other side of the house. Hans heard his brother's cry and pulled open the door between the stables and the workshop. Hans saw the fire. To his consternation, he saw that the staircase burned as well. He shouted, "Simon, I will get Mum and Dad. You get the animals out of the barn." Hans ran upstairs, 2 and 3 steps at a time over the burning stairs. He took a bowl with water from the kitchen and without hesitation emptied it over his father and mother. The farmer and his wife were startled and woke up. "The farm is on fire! I will carry you down!" The incredibly strong Hans took his mother on one shoulder, his father on the other. He ran out of the bedroom, through the living room. There was a lot of fire in the stairwell now. Hans was down the stairs in 3 leaps. He kicked open the front door and put his parents down outside. Fortunately, because of their soaked pajamas, the farmer and his wife had not been burnt. Hans ran around the farm to see how Simon was doing, getting the animals out of harm's way. His older brother had opened the stable doors. Oh my! The fire had already reached there. The animals panicked because of the fire and the smoke that hung under the ceiling. Simon screaming also didn't help. It made the animals even more afraid. The pigs ran haphazardly around the stable. The chickens fluttered from here and there. The cows had wide open white eyes and were stuck in the door opening, trying to all get out at the same time. Hans saw that all the animals would burn or suffocate if nothing happened. The boy knew what to do. There was no one else as good with animals as he. He shouted, "Simon, go away! The animals are afraid of you!" Simon fled and watched from a distance. Hans walked into the stables. He was certain of himself and radiated serenity. He was calm. He spoke calmly with the cows, the pigs, and the chickens. The animals grew quiet, stopped running and pushing. Hans stroked the animals on their heads, led them out one by one. Outside, they were then guided further by his father. Hans took the chickens in his arms, 3 or 4 at a time, and carried them out. That way, all the animals were safely out. And just in time, as the farm totally collapsed in a fountain of sparks. Dazed, the family sat together next to the smouldering remains of their home. It was father who spoke first. "Hans," he said, "you have saved all of us and the cattle. Without you, we would all have been dead." "But what do we do now?" cried his brother and mother. Hans had thought about this and said, "Listen, I have an idea. We will sell all the animals except 1 bull, 1 cow, 1 pig, 1 boar, which is a male pig, the cockerel, and 1 hen." His brother and parents looked at him. "With the money earned, we will build and start a new farm." Hans paused for a moment. "Over the next 5 years, if all of us work hard, we should be able to build a second farm. The first farm is for Simon, the second for Annette and me. Simon would maintain the machines and do the administration on both farms. Simon would sell the cattle, milk, butter, and cheese and eggs from the 2 farms. Hans would take care of the animals, both on his own farm as well as on his brother's farm. And so they laboured and toiled. 5 years later, the family built a second farm next door. Hans and Annette married and went to live on the new farm. The brothers Simon and Hans and their families lived happily ever after. The clever Simon maintained the machines and did the administration, and the incredibly strong and gentle Hans took care of the animals.